So there's a presidential election in 2024, in case you haven't heard, in the United States of America. Big deal, right? These elections are always huge. And I think the astrology is telling us something about who's going to win. It has a pretty strong message and a persuasive message. And that is that the Democratic Party, whoever the nominee is, will assume the presidency in 2024. Democrats win in 2024, so says the astrology. Stay tuned, I'm going to break it all down. All right, so it's early in this political process, this cycle of American politics. I'm sitting here in June 2023. The election isn't for 15 months, 17 months, however long it is, November 2024. Some of you might be saying, SJ, what are you doing? Why are you coming out so early? Well, I deliberately want to come out, get this prediction video out of the way, and then really not talk about this much more, because I think that this cycle that I'm about to share in this video is so persuasive. I'm not sure how much more we would even need, in my opinion, to look at with the presidential election and with what might happen in this election cycle. And so that's part of the reason why I just want to share this and then move on to other astrological topics. Every cycle, this becomes a major deal in the astrological community, and you're going to see continual videos by astrologers making predictions, talking about what they think is going to happen in the election. So, this will be my offering, and I may look at the nativities of the nominees once those are known midway through 2024 and add some context here. But I'm also open to never talking about this again. So first things first, the ISAR, International Society of Astrological Research, they have ethics rules. It's important to always start with ethics, I find, when I talk about mundane predictions, or I like to do it often. And this is rule A, public figures, B, mundane or political predictions. I don't have the number of this ethics rule, unfortunately. You can just go and type in mundane, economic, or political predictions. But they say when interpreting charts of global, financial, social, political, geophysical, or other mass events, astrologers do not make dire predictions of imminent disaster. That won't be made in this video, or lead to unreasonable fears in the public. Nothing here, I hope, will generate fears in you. Maybe you don't like the party, the Democrats, that I'm going to predict, but hopefully you're not going to have unnecessary fear here. And then negative predictions are tempered with disclaimers. So it's not an exact science. Astrological variables can manifest in different events of similar meaning, and astrology cannot predict with absolute certainty the outcome of future astronomical events. Not sure what C, with C, I never know what it means, future astronomical events. I mean, that's the astronomers measuring the astronomy. I'm not sure how astrologers are going to say, hey, the sun won't rise tomorrow. That would be a little bit strange. Maybe that's where they're getting at. So anyhow, this isn't perfect. I'm doing the best I can. I might be wrong. I'm fully open to that. That's what astrologers open themselves up to when they wade into these political waters, and I'm certainly doing that. So if you like the Republican Party or another third party, which is I've always been partial to, maybe there's, don't take this as some kind of gospel. Your party very well may win. We mean astrologers get things wrong all the time, especially with presidential elections. So a little bit of the background on this video. This comes from a tweet all the way back in April. And I saw this Twitter personality, Mario Natal, and I like him because he always has breaking news and he's running Twitter spaces and all of this stuff. But he has a tweet when he learned that Biden would run for re-election. Back in April, Biden announced, he said Friday that he decided to run and he would officially announce relatively soon. And I had this tweet, I might as well say it now, but after doing some very preliminary cycle research, I'm 95% or more convinced the Democrats will win the next election. And part of it was I used this just to check in with my favorite technique for predicting elections. And it was so determinative, I just announced it right away. That's what you'll see in this breakdown. And so there you go, the official announcement has been made. We know that Trump is running for president. We know that Biden is running for president. So there's many names in the hat as of now. And to be clear, this video, the conclusion is that the Democratic Party nominee will win. We don't know who that nominee is yet. Biden could pass on. He could lose the nomination process, but the Democrat will win is the core of this prediction. So political bias, in my view, is very important to consider. I mean, I have seen many astrologers predicting these things, and it's always clear, like, this astrologer predicts Biden wins in 2000, and they're just a diehard Democrat. It's clear from like their other content. Or this astrologer predicts Trump will win in 2000, and they're a hardcore Trumper. And it's worth just considering that. We have to understand that our biases can influence the predictions we make. So I just want to address that here in a few slides. If you look at the 2020 election, the predictions of astrologers, this forum SkyScript, which is the SkyScript Astrology Forum, amazing astrology forum, and every cycle for a while they've had a thread there about the USA presidential election. And last time, so Mark is the moderator over there, did a really good job. He combines all the predictions that are out there, and then the final prediction, this is interesting, the last one I found before the election happened, there was 112 predictions, and 60 people predicted Donald Trump would win in 2000. And so astrologers don't get it right. That's another core message of this video. Astrologers get things wrong all the time. What does it say about our craft, right? That the best in the field, a amalgam of the professional predictions shows a wrong answer. And I think the same thing in 2016. It was a wrong answer. A lot of people predicted Hillary, and it was this famous controversy at the ISAR conference. There was a panel in 2016, and I think some major media outlets came and they got it wrong. So we've had egg in our face as a community around these predictions. So it's worth noting here, I said it's a pretty even split in terms of party. That's pretty even with an edge to Trump and to the Republicans. And this is important. I hear politics are like that other thing that everybody has, you know what I'm saying, and are derived from things that we can't control, that we're born into, people's culture, their family, and their education. This is why I don't hold this against people. I mean, some people are I've been canceled on Twitter. I even, when I posted that tweet I just read you earlier, people, very few, but some attacked me. They're like, oh, you can't, this just demeans our political agency. I'm like, and my response was, listen, I'm an astrologer. This is what we do. Every year we use our craft and we hone the tools of our craft to make these predictions. I'm not saying here by doing this that you should just stop any political activity if that's part of your fate and part of your passion. Get out there, do your political activity for whoever you're supporting. This is not meant to replace that. But just keep in mind, look, people are born to the families and to the culture and to the enculturation and to the propaganda context, the matrices that they come out into. And so it's just worth keeping in mind. If this is really a call, have some heart here and some compassion for other people. Try to put yourselves in their shoes and their beliefs and what they've gone through can really change and inform their political beliefs. And I always say it's the least interesting thing often about a person is what they believe politically. It's like, what's your favorite football team? I tend to not want to hold that against anybody. And I tend to find that transcendental human feature that we all share independent of this stuff. That's really what I want to, during this upcoming political cycle, is try to just love my fellows and be kind and hear people out. I think that's what's more important for me than anything. I want to listen to, when I get into these conversations, like, yeah, share with me why you're passionate, what you believe passionately, because I want to learn from people. I want to hear actually where they're getting their beliefs or why they feel what they feel or what information they have. This is also the political landscape's about an information minefield. And often there's silos, and then you can have people share their beliefs and then the information they have, and then I learn about the world, but I can also not judge people. There's people that love this publication, right? The MSM. And they're going to believe largely what the editors at those MSM outlets say. And I'm not going to attack them. Then there's other people that maybe reject that, and they only are on a fringe, and they believe what those fringe things say. But it's good to just listen and learn and let people teach me, because I want to learn about the world, and really I want to care and love people more than anything, than dismiss people because of their politics. Anyhow, this is very much an aside. And yes, everything is political in some very abstract sense. The fact that I'm drinking this brand of water is a political act because this company has political affiliation and they're probably funding certain people and politics, and so everything's political. A sneeze is political. Yes, arguably, I didn't, keep it in or hold it out. But this is a very abstract sense. I think that's a pretty extreme view. I think there's some truth to it, but I think here we can try to, as astrologers, I am trying to at least take a step back and just see what the astrology may be trying to tell us. Really as the primary motivation here, and trying to center that separate from my political bias. And of course, here's my bias. I mentioned it in the tweet. I said, by the way, I do not support the Democratic Party or Republican, because I've never voted for either of those parties' presidential candidates in my life. I do not support these parties. And I'm not going to go off on a rant on that, but basically it's because my conscience won't let me support these parties that have what I consider blood all over them, all over their hands, all over every part of their bodies and all of their it's institutional. It's real evil in my view. I can't, with my conscience, support them. I never have. I've always had third-party affiliations. That said, I mention my personal bias here because I want to normalize astrologers including that in their political predictions, because it's useful, I think, when processing what is being predicted. So I offer that to you. Process it, use this to process what I'm about to share in whatever way you'd like to. This is another key point. You do not need natal charts of candidates to make an accurate prediction. You do not need it. I was told by some colleagues, like, wait until next year, we'll get, no, you don't need a natal chart at all. And I'm not going to discuss any nativities in this video, just to make that point. I may in later videos, like I said, when the nominees are known. But it's purely based, this prediction, on one key planetary cycle. That's it. It's one cycle of one planet. And it's the same cycle I used to accurately predict 2020. I was in the Biden camp. On the list of predictions from Market Skyscript, I was listed there and I predicted Biden. And you can find the video here on my YouTube channel. It's called Democrats Win November 2020. That's the title of the video too. And I just said it's the cycle of Saturn. And that's the spoiler here. If you want to use the technique I'm about to break down, it's simply the Saturn cycle, and to a lesser extent the Jupiter-Saturn cycle. But mainly it's simply the cycle of Saturn, the core planet of foundations in the society that moves through our zodiac every 30 years, 29 and a half years. That planet is quite persuasive, I found, when it comes to making political predictions. So this was a tweet back in that same time in June 2020. So I waited until summer of the election year last time. This time I'm doing it the summer before the election year. But I said here, the meat of my presidential prediction is based on a longer term transit cycle that has nothing to do with the nativity. And I like this, I said, because we only had AA time for Trump and Harris, none of the others. And you'll find that's a big challenge with political nativities. They're often not accurate. Even Lois Rodin, the famous collector of nativities, and she developed a rubric of how to rate the quality of a birth time. She has a note there that's like, be wary of what politicians tell you about their birth time, always, because they lie. They're politicians. They want to present better than maybe they actually are. And so this is why using the nativities is a challenge sometimes when you make political predictions, because we don't have a good birth time. Okay, so here's the conclusion. This is the same slide that's at the end. I just wanted to start with the conclusion now. The only 3 elections while Saturn was in Pisces in the last 150 years, there's only been 3 with Saturn in Pisces. When you had a presidential election, the day of it, Saturn was in Pisces. Those 3 all had the party in power staying in power. And the last 2 were the Democratic Party in power before the election and staying in power as a result of the Saturn and Pisces election. Those last 2 were Roosevelt in the 1930s, won re-election during Saturn and Pisces, and Bill Clinton won re-election in 96 with Saturn and Pisces. The other point here, core point, in the last 150 years, whatever party took over last before Saturn entered Pisces remained in power all of Saturn and Pisces. So you just find the date of Saturn's entry into Pisces. You go back to the previous election where a new party came into power. That party stays in power throughout Saturn and Pisces. So Saturn and Pisces with the US presidential election is not one where things change. It's a continuity transit. So in the stats that we're going to look at, I'm going to use this Guardian website data blog. This is just something from 2012, October, and it lists every US president. And I'm not using any nativities. That cuts out a lot of problems. I already talked about that. The birth time guessing, the technical morass. You have a nativity, it's thousands of different techniques, all the astrologers from every tradition applying a variety of techniques. They're all different. And that's actually a feature, not a bug. And this is what I was telling a person on Twitter. They were trying to cancel me for even saying this. Like, hey, you're undercutting our political agency. It's like, I'm not doing that at all. Actually, this is a tried and true custom for astrologers to cut our teeth on our techniques using our favorite natal techniques, all of the variety of techniques that exist. And we get to have a survey every 4 years of the popular techniques that working astrologers are using across the fields, across the traditions. those predictions on Mark's forum on Skyscript, there was Vedic astrologers, there's Draconic astrologers, there's all kinds of astrologers using all kinds of zodiacs and all kinds of techniques and house systems and everything. So it's a really cool way to just have a survey of the power of different techniques and who's using what technique. That's a feature. On the other hand, not using a nativity like I'm not doing here, it really does extract me from that morass, and I get to just operate on a higher level of mundane astrological cycle work, the simple nature of that, which is something I've always gravitated towards. So I'm very happy to get to do it. So now we're just going to run through the history, just to, come with receipts, you might say. Some of you are going to be really interested in this history. So we go back. I'm going to start here with 1876, Saturn and Pisces election. So Saturn was in Pisces during the election. There's a continuity of power. You're going to see that over and over again. Continuity of power. The Republicans kept control. Ulysses S. Grant was the Republican president. This election was Rutherford B. Hayes. And the party that took over last before Saturn entered Pisces, again a key point, remained in power during all of Saturn and Pisces. And this was a 16-year run for the Republicans. It was 1868-69 to 1884-85. These are the Reconstruction era presidents, post-Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant, the famous Civil War general for the Union. Moving next to the next presidential election with Saturn and Pisces. So this is McKinley, William McKinley, the famous assassinated William McKinley. Not a lot of people know that. It was Abraham Lincoln's assassinated, McKinley's assassinated, Kennedy's assassinated. He was assassinated in 1901, shortly after Saturn and Capricorn re-election. So he was reelected with Saturn and Capricorn. But Roosevelt takes over as vice president and then wins a Saturn and Aquarius election and serves during all of Saturn and Pisces. So he was elected with Saturn and Aquarius, serves during all of Saturn and Pisces. And again, continuity of power for the political party that came in before Saturn entered Pisces, and there's no party change. 1896 to 1912, another 16-year run for the Republicans here. Next in chronological order, moving forward, we come to the 1930s. We have Roosevelt elected in the last weeks of Saturn and Capricorn during an economic crisis. That was when he was first elected in 1932. And it was a change of party. Key part of the prediction last time, it was Saturn and Capricorn Aquarius often brought new parties into power, new revolutionary Aquarian-style presidencies. And so Roosevelt comes into power, and he takes over and then wins the Saturn and Pisces election, the one that happened in 1936, and then serves during all of Saturn and Pisces, and then he serves during all of Saturn and Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. He was around for a long, long, long time. There was no party change from 1932 till 1952, a 20-year run for the Democrats in the 1930s, 40s, and into the 1950s. Again, Saturn and Pisces continuity. Next, we have the 1960s, the great Kennedy, the icon John F. Kennedy. He is elected during a Saturn and Capricorn election in 1960. Change of party, again, Saturn and Capricorn, Saturn and Aquarius, change of party. And then Johnson takes over after Kennedy is assassinated in 1963, and he wins while Saturn is in Aquarius, but then he serves during all of Saturn and Pisces again. And so there's no party change. It was 8 years. The Democrats had a nice run with that continuity during Saturn and Pisces. And this is worth noting because you had a change through an event, just like when Roosevelt took over for McKinley. Now that was quite a bit before Saturn entered Pisces, but this is pretty close. November 1963, Saturn comes into Pisces the next year. You have this change through a tragedy. This could be in play here. A lot of my astrologer friends have been predicting for a long time that Harris could be taking over for Biden. So just worth mentioning it here. You see this pattern repeat a few times. Next, the 1990s. Bill Clinton elected during Saturn and Aquarius. Again, the Aquarian Democrat with that new energy, that new Aquarian energy. And then he serves through all of Saturn and Pisces, re-elected during Saturn in Pisces. And there was no party change, another 8-year run for the Democrats. You see it right here, serving during all of Saturn and Pisces. So there you go. That's the last 150 years. That's the last 5 times Saturn has been in Pisces before now. And you see this continuity of political parties staying in power. This is just the conclusion screen again. I'll read it quickly again. The only 3 elections while Saturn was in Pisces in the last 150 years were parties in power staying in power, and the last two were Democratic Party wins, Roosevelt and Clinton. In the last 150 years, whichever party took over last before Saturn entered Pisces remained in power during all of Saturn and Pisces. And then there's the different long stints of the last 5 times. So this is pretty persuasive, isn't it? I mean, we've got 5 for 5. This would be 6 for 6. Now, cycles break, but I love that this cycle is quite dispositive in my view for what to expect. You know, the Democrats win, Joe Biden wins, Kamala Harris wins, Bobby Kennedy Jr. wins. So we'll see. Okay, why? Cycle work is sometimes simply pure data. We don't even need to talk about the symbolism of Saturn or the symbolism of Pisces. Doesn't matter. It's just a data point that you've plugged in, and it's a cycle that relies on that data point and the repetition of that data point. And we find that correlation to our material world. So that's the first point. We don't need to try to go and explain much more than just showing the correlation. But if we do, come to the Sibly chart and look where Pisces is. It's the 4th whole sign house. The root, the foundation is the 4th house. Pisces comprises it. And I think this is where I'm starting to delineate symbolically why this is happening, is that the roots and foundations, when Saturn, the planet of foundation, travels through the house of foundation, the 4th house, whole sign house in the Sibly chart, you get this real rootedness and continuity because there's these foundational touch points that are hit with this transit. And this is the other thing. The first election ever for a US president, George Washington, was a Saturn and Pisces election. So it's the Saturn return of the institution of the President of the United States. And George Washington was elected unanimously. So that's probably part of it too, is the root chart of all this has a real powerful, unanimous continuity of power style, injection of energy. Washington had been a general, helped win the Revolutionary War. So he was kind of a main leader that just stayed in power when the office of presidency comes online. Saturn is lasting things. And so there's that symbolism. You can see Saturn as lasting things. I think those are some of the reasons why it might explain Saturn and Pisces being a continuity of power transit. Other than the first election with George Washington, with Saturn and Pisces, there's only one exception in the whole of the history. And it's a very interesting exception because James K. Polk, he gets elected in 1845 with Saturn in Aquarius. So it's a new party, a Democratic Aquarian Democratic Party election, just like we saw in all these other examples. But he promises that he would leave after one term. That was part of his election strategy, and he honored it. It was a campaign pledge, and he honored it. So maybe that is a little bit of what explains it not working. Now, the party lost, the Democrats lost, and the Whig Party took back over. And so, it doesn't fit. But one out of all of the history, one only doesn't fit. And maybe I tried to look here, how is this like now? And I couldn't really find a direct or persuasive correlation to the charts of this period and where we are now to think this would be an exception in 2024. Now there's the guys before Polk, and these guys were amazing. They ran it back for a whole Saturn cycle. Democrat-Republican Party. Jeffersonian Republicans is another name. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. They were in power for a long, long time. John Quincy Adams was also someone from this party. And it was Saturn and Capricorn, 1811 all the way through. But it still fits here. The party that comes into power before Saturn and Pisces stays in power for the whole of the Saturn and Pisces transit. So this confirms the technique. And then finally, the first presidential election was a Saturn and Pisces election, like I said. And you can see here, George Washington was unanimously elected by the 69 members of the Electoral College, making him the only chief executive in history to do so. And maybe that's part of what this is. It's just the foundations of the American, experiment. The American entity has this unanimity when Saturn comes into Pisces, this continuity, which I know is a little bit different, but there's something to that, I think. All right, and so here we are now with Donald J. Trump, Joseph R. Biden. These are the last two presidents. Here we are now with the Saturn cycle. Joe Biden was elected at the end of Saturn and Capricorn, but he's basically been a Saturn and Aquarius president. The cycle of Saturn and Aquarius starts in March 2020, before the election. And he's been in power this whole time. Saturn is now in Pisces, will not go back to Aquarius. And so for the no party change to hold true again, Biden would win, or the Democrats would win, but Biden could step down. He could be replaced by Harris, McKinley, Roosevelt, or Kennedy Johnson. We've seen these replacements take place. So that's a possibility. This prediction could hold true even if Biden is not the nominee. But I think if this holds, the next chance for Republicans would be 2028 or later. And this is mid-Uranus return. Uranus leaves Gemini in 2032, 2033. This Uranus return is an amazingly volatile transit for America. And so I think maybe it would be like mid-volatility, the Republicans come in, or after the Republicans may come back in. So it would be an 8-year, 12-year run for the Democrats. Now, what about wild cards? How might this go wrong? And I think it's worth considering it. And this slide is the basis for a lot of the work I'm going to be doing the rest of this year and into next year, because it's the core of the mundane questions around the American experience. And I'm actually going to be doing a talk for Skyscript. They have a mundane conference. I think we're finalized my participation in that. And so I'm going to talk about a lot of these topics. I haven't quite figured out which one I'm going to focus on. But here are the 2024 wildcards. You have 2 visible solar eclipses that cross right through America in October 2023 and in March 2024. And they crisscross right through America, right through Texas. You've seen those maps. I'm not going to break any of this stuff down now. A lot of us have been breaking this down. You can find me talking about all this stuff, and I'm going to be talking about it more in depth as we continue. So those 2 visible eclipses, when you eclipse a nation, you change leadership. Maybe that will be part of this prediction going haywire and the Republicans actually winning, where it breaks this pattern or cycle. U.S. Pluto return finishes over the next 15 months or 16 months. We're back and forth, Pluto back and forth. It's just re-entered Capricorn yesterday, and now Pluto will go back to Aquarius, then back to Capricorn, and then finally in Aquarius. Right around the month of the election of 2024 is the final entry of Pluto in Aquarius. And so that is always a wild card. Deep transformation, deep truth emergent. Everything's in play to tear down and then transform. So maybe this cycle is going to be over with the Pluto return, the nodal return and Venus cycle return of the crazy 1968. So we are now on the Venus star point cycle of the year 1968, and we have the nodal return when the nodes enter Aries Libra here in July, very soon. We're locking in now. What happened in 1968? MLK gets assassinated, RFK gets assassinated. There was a lot of turmoil, and of course, Richard Nixon wins because he runs as the anti-war Republican. The Democrats were bogged down in the Vietnam War, which was extremely unpopular. What are the Democrats bogged in down now? This proxy war, as some say, in Europe. And so maybe you have this anti-war Republican ticket that somehow emerges. I don't know. That would fit the nodal cycle of 1968, which is also the Jupiter-Saturn cycle that we're in. Every 60 years, Jupiter and Saturn repeat. So we're in the 1960s, and now we get the nodal return of that transit for that period. So it's really hitting that 1968 could be a crazy 2024 mirroring or resonating with 1968. We have economic banking crisis. We have war in Europe. All of this stuff could lend itself to a major turmoil. Now, Roosevelt survived turmoil in the 1930s and stayed in power. There's something about continuity of power and crisis as well. And that's what I think actually supports the Democrats in this case. When you have these really tumultuous events all over the world, you sort of lean on the same people for a certain stability to kind of protect, or maybe it's a psychic thing. Just keep me safe kind of thing. And we turn over, the population turns over that agency and keep me safe, President Biden, please. And then it's just a continuity of that safety. We're on the cusp of Uranus and Gemini, and that is a huge wild card. So that's another wild card. I know astrologer Nick Dagan best. He says Trump wins because of Uranus and Gemini. I'm very skeptical about that. I don't think Trump, how many charges are against him? Like 10 or 20 indictments, and they're just going to keep coming. Even if there was no indictments, I find it hard to believe. There's a lot of Trump fatigue. Anyhow, that's my sense. I just don't feel like Trump is going to win. A lot of people are thinking he will, and this is the divergent nature of these predictions. I don't know. I'm leaning on the Saturn cycle. I think it's quite dispositive, like I said, and persuasive. So anyhow, these could support continuity of power thesis, as crisis often creates continuity, like I just said. Or it can mean wild and crazy times and unpredictability, and this prediction will fail, my prediction will fail. But there's other layers here. Here's a Marianne Williamson tweet from April 24 when the DNC announced no primary debates. The DNC basically says we're shutting down any kind of process by which the Democratic Party will seek or find a candidate. So no primary debates, nope, they're not going to do these primaries. I think they're not participating in some. Basically, the DNC is going to do what the DNC always does, which is decide whatever they want, whoever they want the nominee to be. I think it was those lawsuits in 2016 where it just comes out where their lawyers argue that they can pick whoever they want. They don't even need to have primaries. It's just guys in a back room with cigars can pick the nominee. That's a paraphrase from that lawsuit. But effectively, they're going to shut down candidates like Marianne Williamson. They're going to shut down candidates like Bobby Kennedy. So here we go. The pro-oligarchy selection, this is my term, will be controlled by the powerful interests that run the system. And that might support continuity of power. I mean, you've got the so-called uniparty with the Biden presidency, where a lot of the old establishment, neocons and neolibs and all of the kind of old guard or power structure of the country is behind him. They may just select this continuity idea. And this is the most interesting thing to me so far through the whole of this cycle that's just begun is RFK Jr. Wow, he threw his name in the hat. And RFK Jr. is the Pluto candidate. This is how I'm describing it, because his whole campaign is deep truths about the American experience. Here was a tweet from May 24th, quoting Dylan, and I quoted this Dylan song a few months ago when I was talking about, I forgot the context, but come you masters of war, you that build all the guns, you that build the death planes, you that build the big bombs, you that hide behind walls, you that hide behind desks, I just want you to know I can see through your masks. This is Bobby Kennedy Jr. saying, listen, we've got a military-industrial complex problem in America. And basically coming out, it's not just quoting Dylan, it's like his whole campaign. He's just like calling out alphabet agency involvement in the American, domestic landscape and foreign policy corruption and the horrible, nature of that American kind of colonial, neo-colonial military dominance of the world and all of the horrible things that it's been responsible for. So there's that side of his campaign, which is very Plutonic. Remember, Pluto's deep truth. It's going at and exposing things from that deep, true reality. The masks come off, right? You see through the masks and there's Pluto. And it's confronting and then being transformed by that confrontation. But remember, RFK Jr.'s family is directly connected to these deep, dark parts of American history. Prohibition, his grandfather, Joe Kennedy, was a gangster, an Irish gangster making tons of money off Prohibition. Watch Peaky Blinders. They have the Joe Kennedy character in the last season or the last couple of seasons. And then he was the SEC, head of the SEC with Roosevelt. He was the ambassador to England. But then the assassinations of RFK and JFK, that is like so Plutonic. Pluto can be death. And then the coup that happens, that a lot of commentators talk about the coup in America that we're still living under. When these assassinations in the 1960s, military-industrial complex or these certain financial interests seize power over the country. So that he's even talking about that on the campaign trail. That's Pluto. It's not just business as usual. It's not just the smile of, yes we can, or, make America great. These kind of cheap slogans that often appear in a presidential campaign. This is like deep truth. No, this government and the clandestine forces behind it have done this, this, and this, and this. These are their crimes. This is the true nature of governance. This is the nature of his campaign. So it fits that we have RFK Jr. emerging during the Pluto return as it finishes. He's Pluto. This is the Pluto return, a candidate. He's the voice of the Pluto return in one sense. So he's describing true power structures that are part of his campaign dynamic. So I think Bobby Kennedy is some kind of wild card here. He's running as a Democrat. Now, I personally don't think he'll win, but if he ends up being the nominee, I think he will win. He'll easily beat Trump or whoever comes out, DeSantis. Quickly, let's take a look at the Aries Ingres. Always good to do that. So I am using this isn't a nativity, but it's the Aries Ingres. You always look at it for the year of the election, and the technique is simple. The 10th house is the party in power. The ruling planets of the 10th house represent the party in power. The 4th house is the opposition party, and its ruling planets are the opposition party. And then you just try to delineate which might be stronger. What's this chart saying? You have Pluto in the 4th house, which is that the opposition party is some kind of plutonic thing with the Pluto return. Now this could be Trump, right? Trump has been indicted just within the last week as I've recorded this. That's all Pluto return stuff, because the critics and people from the rest of the world are saying this is Banana Republic. The opposition leader who's a shoo-in for the nomination, may arrest him and put him in jail. It's shocking to see that. Of course, the other side is saying, don't do the crime if you can't do the time, Donald. And then you have the same week, right around the same day, the allegations that there's an FBI document that says the Biden family gets these $5 million payments from Burisma in Ukraine. Either way you shake it, there's a major Pluto return component, and it's in the fourth house with Mars of the opposition party. I think that's already describing like the Trump indictment and maybe the violence, either it's going to be done to Trump or that the Trump supporters may do violence somehow, that there's some kind of violent part of this process. The deep truths and the violence that results from those deep truths. It's just like 1968, to go back to that cycle, the violence at the Democratic National Convention, the protesting, the war in Vietnam, that's all Pluto-Mars. We'd have to go back and look at that Aries Ingres to see if there's some kind of Pluto-Mars combination, but I won't do that here. But what I have here, violence could play a role with the opposition, or somehow enacted on the opposition by the ruling party. And part of why I say that is the Egyptian term of the midheaven in this chart. So this would be the point maybe most representative of the ruling party. It's ruled by Mars, that somehow the ruling party has some violence or warlike stuff, and then it's in the fourth house of the opposition party. And so that very much interests me. And the other thing is, this could be just saying that the war is going to continue to increase. I'm talking about the war in Europe. And when that happens, emergencies and national emergencies, as that gets going, you might have all kinds of things enacted in a state of emergency that would support continuity of power. That could be what this is describing. The moon is the people in mundane astrology. The people are with the party in power. That's pretty persuasive in a certain way, that the masses of people choose the Democrats, right? You also have the exalted sun. So if you just look at the rulers, the sun as the domicile ruler of the party in power, it is exalted in Aries in the weak sixth house with the north node, wide orb. So does that exalted sun in the weaker sixth, does that beat a peregrine Saturn, which rules the fourth house, in the strong fifth house with its exaltation lord? And maybe it would seem so, just because the sun has more dignity than Saturn. That's a real high-level way to do these delineations. So we'll see. It also shows us that there could be illness with the leadership, and this could be Biden having illness and being replaced. I just saw a news story today that he's going to have some dental stuff done, and he's missing some meetings. So anyhow, I think this could be telling us that Biden's health could be an issue. And what if there is Harris? Remember that the replacement of Kennedy happens after he's assassinated in November '63, so about a year before the election. We still have plenty of time if there's resonances where there could be Biden stepping down for whatever reason, for health reasons. I'm not as much making that prediction. Many of my colleagues have. I just think that the Aries Ingres chart, having the party in power, the ruler right there in the sixth house of health, supports that in a certain sense. Staying on the chart, the final dispositors of the chart are Venus and Jupiter. And you can see here they're looped together in a mutual reception by domicile. They mutually receive each other. But Venus maybe is stronger as it's exalted in the fifth, and that supports Saturn, whereas Jupiter is not exalted, though it's in its Egyptian term. So they both have some pretty strong secondary dignity. And, I don't know. I think that when you look at Jupiter in its own Egyptian term, pretty darn close to the descendant, so it's crematistikos or quickened, and it rules the midheaven by night triplicity. That's a powerful benefic, configured to the midheaven, strong, that Jupiter. And then you compare this exalted Venus, also strong, right there with the ruling planet of the fourth. So this fact that there's this looping mutual reception, I'm not sure if it changes how I would predict things. I think both of these benefics are strong and they're helping both parties. But my prediction for the year is basically major creative breakthroughs on many levels. And the art that may come out of this could be talked about for decades, or these events there might be art created around these events for decades. Just like in 1968, I watched that Bernardo Bertolucci picture, Dreamers, or The Dreamers. Forgot if there's a D in the title. Great movie. I love it. It's about the 1968 protests in Paris and an American there. And it's an erotic movie. But it's a wonderful film. If you like Berlucci or Eva Green is in it. I just love the creativity and the artistry in the film. But you can see they're making art about this dynamic and volatile year of 1968. So maybe this will be what 2024 is, something that we write about and think about and talk about for generations to come. And it's because these creative planets, Jupiter and Venus, loop in mutual receptions and very creative signs. So we're in this time now too, Jupiter in Taurus, Saturn in Pisces. And so get your creativity on. I'm always going to remind you about that for the next year. It's a very creative time. Get into your creativity. Set aside politics if that's not your thing and just make art. It's a great time for that. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this kind of deeper breakdown of the election. I covered a lot here, I think. And, have a good political season and a political cycle. And, just know that my heart goes out to you, whatever your passions are. I just hope you can protect your heart and emotions and try to be safe, whatever you need. The self-care can often be really important during politics season. Take time away. Don't get involved at all if you don't want to. And protect your heart and love the people around you and love yourself. That's to me the most important thing. That, like I said earlier, politics is everything. But generating love and sharing that love in the local sphere to me is the best politics that there is. So I want to encourage you to do that as much as you can. And take care out there. SJAnderson144.com. You can check out my reading schedule readings with me if you'd like. And I'll be back soon. More videos coming. Take care of yourself and peace.